Hey everyone, this is Henny of Critical Faculty. Today was really an unplanned conversation. It's a conversation stems from the recent debacle with regards to Dr. Price, some of his views, and I've had a relationship with Dr. Price for a number of months now, where I've hosted him on my channel. There are a few things that I need to question because my experience with Dr. Price is that of somebody who's a gentleman, a true gentleman, is on air, is exactly the same person off air. My interactions with him were quite scholarly and had bits and pieces of great sense of humor. We share our love for action heroes and superhero and comics. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Price to the studio one more time. Hey, Dr. Price, may I call you Bob today? I usually call you
please
Dr.
do,
Price.
yeah.
I want to call you Bob for a certain reason. I think I'll still call you Dr. Price when I chat to you about academic stuff. But today I am going to have a human and a brain-to-brain conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say one more thing. If you recognize the figures behind me, these are all your figures.
Oh, I can see. I think.
Like in a silhouette. I made sure they look like a sort of a silhouette in the background.
Yeah, I can't see all that well, but I see blue lit containers of, no doubt, if I can see them, familiar looking old friends.
Indeed, for those who don't know, I purchased a kind of a large amount of action hero figures from Dr. Price, and I'm going to be forever grateful for the memory and yeah. So we share lots of things when we chat off air, and there are a couple of things that sort of brewing at the moment. And unfortunately, there are a couple of things where humanity is heading, and we talked about it off air, where I'm not liking the situation, where it's the hastiness of canceling and hating and not taking a moment to understand exactly what the situation is about and take our time. Especially, I mean, I wanted to have this conversation because I have a lot of respect for you, and I quite like your character and your sense of humor and your position on biblical history. However, when I was confronted by the shorts of your talk with Pine Creek, I just couldn't digest the situation. I was conflicted because I thought to myself, this was a different person than the person I'm always chatting with. Then I watched the whole thing, and things have improved a bit because there was some context. And today I'm going to be challenging certain ideas, and I'm going to be straightforward rather than beating around the bush. And I'll start with asking you the question. Some gentleman is asking me to change ethnic discrimination to racism, and I've explained to you, Dr. Price, why I call it ethnic discrimination is because scientifically it's just the genus Homo. We belong to one race. There's never been different races, and I think there is a predication of xenophobia within the human evolution. And if it's understood in that way, it might be resolved one day. So on the issue of racism, as it's colloquially called these days, but I would like to call it ethnic discrimination, you've made quite clear that you have African-American friends and you don't judge people by things that they haven't chosen for themselves. Rather, I mean, the issue of free will is a different, not in context right now, but those who we have the illusion of free will, you're criticizing actions rather than colors. Or may you please elaborate?
What I think of the
on that issue, on whether you've got a different treatment for people who look differently than you.
The one of my favorite Bible verses is not even in some people's Bible because it's in the book of Sirach or Ecclesiasticus in the so-called Apocrypha. It's really surprisingly anachronistic in the sense that it sounds way ahead of its time. The sage says, which is the best race? And his answer is the human race. And because really there's only one. So it seems to me like I won't say that I'm colorblind, which formerly you were supposed to be and now you're not supposed to be. I notice all these differences and rejoice in them. I know that sounds like a cliche, but for decades, I remember back when I was a teenage fundamentalist, I went to a church where we had missionaries coming in and out, and nationals from different countries and all that. And I just found it fascinating, all the differences in the complexions, the dress, the accents. Oh boy, do I love different accents. And a couple of years ago, I was in the waiting room of the doctors, and an African woman, not just African American, I'm pretty sure she was right from Africa. She came in with this beautiful, multicolored, patterned robe and headdress. And I made a jerk of myself. I mean, I'd never even seen her. She didn't know me, but I said, please don't give in and start wearing the drab stuff we wear. Keep up the good work. You look great. To me, that I just think that is so fascinating. I think of the Ursula Le Guin story, The Lathe of Heaven, where this guy tries to solve all the world's problems and one by one, and he takes on the race problem. And how does it's like a monkey's paw thing. The wishes keep backfiring, and now everybody's the same color, gray. And this didn't quite work, but that's what it would be like if you didn't have this marvelous diversity and all the different cultures and countries and ethnicities. The more the merrier, and I just celebrate that. So I think the whole, I mystify, I say stuff like this constantly because it comes up constantly. And I'm amazed that people care to call me a racist. I can't imagine what it is there. Do they have me mixed up with another Robert M. Price? I know there are a couple who are not me on Amazon. Maybe they're thinking of one of them. But I just love the diversity of the human race.
So, okay, so I think this puts this to bed. I mean, I've heard you saying that on the Pine Creek episodes, and I think at this stage, accusing you of being racist is kind of not fair at this point. But is there a situation where you would think that there is a vicious cycle with the transatlantic slavery and the trade that led to certain atrocities, and certain people have been pushed down in social order and having to feed on crumbs, and they enter a vicious cycle where they have been victimized and end up shooting themselves in the foot over and over again by so the world might sort of go beyond that point at some point. And do you think there is a lingering feel then I'm a victim, I'm the victim of that particular atrocity, and then living that particular trauma, and some people might find difficult, exactly like in personal situations where the typical dad beating up the son, the son beats up his son, the son, and that cycle of the way you bring up your children continues because the parents never knew better. That was the way you bring up your children, to be tough and face the world, and passing on that traumatic experience. And then comes the one person that says, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to do it to my child. Do you think somebody's going to have to break this bill? Somebody has got to say, enough is enough. We're going to be responsible of our actions.
Well, I hope so, but it should have become clear long ago. I think, in fact, when the Bible says, has God say, I will visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation. Does that mean God is going to make sure they really get the shaft for some reason? I don't think so. I mean, that sounds kind of crazy. Even in an ancient document, it seems to me that is somebody's attempt to explain the kind of generational cycle you just described. That no new generation is going to start de novo. They're born into a world defined and perhaps ruined by the previous generation, and they can't just opt out of it. They're stuck with it, and let's hope they can do a better job of it. But that is inheriting the problem and the repercussions of it from your elders. So the deck is stacked against some people more than others, depending on what line of generations they come from. I had a friend once who sort of reluctantly but gruffly said, okay, I'm a racist, so what? And I said, this guy's very intelligent. I said, I find it hard to believe you really think that. What do you think is the reason for a high black crime rate and so on? Well, within minutes, he was giving me the liberal explanation, which I also accept, that these people were just crushed in slavery and maladapted. I mean, it's amazing they survived, which says something very good about them. But there are problems with how slavery turns into Jim Crow and all this stuff, where they're stuck in a way no other immigrant group is, and so that there is a vicious cycle, and that means it's not genetic. I mean, if you could show that the high crime rate or high poverty rate or something was the result of some chromosome, that would be very daunting, very disturbing, and very hard to deal with. But of course, it's not. It's all external environmental stuff. And what can be done about it? Well, I think that a lot of this has been perpetuated by boneheaded social strategies, like I guess the main architect of which have been Lyndon Johnson. And he was forthright about how his war on poverty and his welfare policies were designed to keep black voters in the pocket of the Democratic Party. He says we ought to have those N words all locked up for 50 years. Well, I see what's going on there. I see what the concern of the Great Society is. And so it was to their advantage. And now you still have that, only it's even worse because there are race hustlers in the African American community, like Al Sharpton, who want to keep people down so they can have something to exploit and keep riding the gravy train. Now, if they could be persuaded not to do it, that might help. Now, and one last thing about this for me, there are more and more African Americans who have beaten the system and through academic effort and talent and excellence have become, let's say, President of the United States, Supreme Court Justice, and various other things, business tycoons. How do you suppose they did that? Well, they had personal resources and self-discipline. But what happens to those people? They kids that are starting on that path are ridiculed and demeaned by their peers who say you're acting white. Where did they get that from? The Ku Klux Klan PR department? You mean to say that it is a selling out of your own heritage if you succeed in the white man's world? You mean your destiny is to be a victim? Surely that's not true. Surely you are being had and tricked now by some of your own leaders. So there are things that could be done, but it's very difficult to get anybody to get off the gravy train, whether it's the government, particular party, or self-serving leaders.
So you believe there are certain groups that would benefit from continuing to make people believe that they are lesser in society, so they can reap the rewards of campaigning in the name of those of
That's
those.
right. Yeah, it's absolutely clear to me that the race relation situation in the United States had gotten much, much better since I was a kid. But to hear these people talk, it's like Bull Connor has miraculous longevity, and he's still turning the German shepherds and the fire hoses on all the black folks he can find. Hey, no, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. People that complain about that are invoking the ghost of these bad old days to bring them back so they can pretend to fight against it and look like the good guys. It's so cynical and manipulative, and they're just race exploiters. So things could be done if certain people would repent.
I'm just going to have to speak to some of the viewers here. Here's a friend of mine. Are you listening, my friend, to the conversation? Because at this point, I think you're not following. You've got a predisposition here. I don't. I'm personally going to be saying what I'm hearing so far isn't racist. So I think you need to just calm down and listen to the full conversation before. I mean, and this is one thing, Dr. Price, I told you about, or Bob, I must say, that I'm not liking about society at the moment, which is the hastiness and how fast people want to turn. It reminds me of that person who brought to the middle of the square as a witch, being judged as a witch, and people who don't even know what the hell is going on, never seen this woman before, start throwing rocks and eggs and oranges, and without even understanding what the situation was. It's almost like they're trying to vent their spleen about certain things they don't like about themselves or society, and to that one person who's going to be the scapegoat for everything. So I want to take a breath, and I want to understand the situation, because I see certain things you're saying or have said that I'm going to be challenging a bit later that is a little bit at odds with your personality and character. But maybe I don't understand them properly. And maybe you're going to correct that understanding of mine. So far on the issue of, again, I'm going to call it colloquially racism because it's what everybody wants to call it. Scientifically, there's no such thing. It's ethnic discrimination. There's only one race, which is the human race. And once we understand the science, we will never be that again, because our anatomy is the same. And we said together we're the same species. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to have children. Black people will not be able to marry white people if we have the genetic shift and drift has happened, and we're no longer able to breed with them. And even if this is the case, we still deal with other species on this planet much the same, because I think our moral responsibility and obligation to the world we live in has now surpassed humanity. We need to look after the whole thing, the whole ecosystem. So far from what I've heard is the emphasis on actions rather than inherited traits, whatever sort. So, which will now include homosexuality. I've heard you saying on Pine Creek that you had a group of people who sort of used you as a mentor, and you were helping their cause, and they were screaming gay. And even Pine Creek laughed at and it was funny. But you said you felt fatherly towards them.
Yes.
You wanted to contain them and you wanted to help them. Can you Now explain, why would you be questioned as a homophobe at this point?
Well, this was at an H.P. Lovecraft related convention, and I have edited over 30 anthologies of this type of this species of horror fiction, you might say. There are many. And these gents were big fans of them. And in fact, I was overwhelmed. There were so many people at this thing that wanted my autograph and all that. It was a new experience. And these guys did, and they were like stereotype gays, and I wasn't revolted, I wasn't judgmental. I thought this was great. I felt like these were my long lost kids or my parishioners or something. I thought they are looking to me. Admittedly, it's just a literary thing, but it means an awful lot to them and to me. And they kind of regarded me as I don't know, an elder or a provider of what they loved, and I loved them. And I thought this was so great. And I thought that about an awful lot of people at this thing, that they seemed to look at me in almost a fatherly role, and I returned the feeling. I don't care what they're like. In fact, well, I guess I do care. If I see somebody like this, I think it's pretty nifty. My old friend, Willem Pugmire, a great horror writer, once again, he made himself conspicuous. This guy would stand out in a crowd. When he was younger, he looked a lot like Boy George and made himself up like that. He was an eccentric. He was hilarious. He was very talented. If somebody had said, well, Bob, here's the magic wand, you could say abracadabra and make Willem straight. What do you say? I would never do that. That would destroy the guy that I knew and loved, sadly passed on now. But his gayness permeated everything about him, his aesthetic, and all these things I loved about the guy. What the heck? According to some people's standards, oh, he shouldn't have been gay. I don't happen to believe that, and it added to him. And the same with these other guys. So my heart goes out to them, and I do not mean in a pitying way. I affirm them and enjoy their fellowship, you might say.
One of the things, and I'm going to have to now. This is my first criticism to you, Dr. Price, or Bob. I keep calling you Dr. Price. You have said that certain anarchists should be shot on the spot, and this is my argument.
Rioters, yes.
Or writers. Okay. Let's say you're an 18 years old kid. You're trying to find your place under the sun. You're suffering certain issues. You get grabbed by a certain group of people. They rally you emotionally, and you end up heading in the wrong direction for a bit. And you end up being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and as a result, your life is ended. Or you're given a second chance. You put in jail, and you're maybe a juvenile. You're told not to do so, or do some community work, or rehabilitation of that sort, and that person's end up being Neil deGrasse Tyson in the future. What do you reckon?
How often is that likely to happen? These people put themselves into the combat situation, either to purposely to tear down and burn down the buildings, or just to take the occasion to play supermarket sweep and loot the stores and so forth. They have put themselves in a situation which we cannot tolerate if we wish to save and preserve civilization. And on the off chance that one of these guys might grow up to be Thomas Sowell or whatever, I don't particularly care for Tyson so much, but loads of black heroes of mine anyway. Or what are the chances? And it's no longer our decision to make, because if you can't make the possible exception into the rule. you know, since any of these guys might turn out to be a new Dr. King or something, let's be easy on them all. That's suicidal. You can't make the exception into the rule. There's no way, and everybody knows it, that you're going to be able to rehabilitate and regenerate all the criminals you apprehend. To try to do it, you get the same kind of nonsense we have with so-called bail reform. So it's just one of the awful necessities of a world in which some people are trying to destroy the civilization or property or lives of another. The gloves have to come off, or you will be an accomplice in the destruction of your own civilization. Well, congratulations.
Well, you see, Bob,
Your peaceful
yeah, I'm in
virtue
agreement with you.
signaling has cost everything.
I'm in agreement with you. I think these guys need to be held responsible. But what kind of repercussions? I mean, ending someone's life for maybe making the wrong decision is a bit too much. I mean, that is to me, it's very similar to the Islamic doctrine. And, you know, I'm part ex-Muslim, where you say if you leave the religion, you should be executed, because, especially when you speak against it, because you are really causing mayhem in society, and you shouldn't be. We shouldn't suffer your existence anymore. We should end your life. So they'd be well justified and motivated for the very same logic. The Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino, you know, the very first scene where he's spitting in a bucket, and you know, and you end up with that story of that guy turning things around. Edward Norton in American History X, and it showed, you know, the neo-Nazi and the shaven head, and you know, and end up being completely a different person. We can display. You like your superheroes, and you know redemption is one of those big stories in humanity. Being able to turn things around, being able to have a really horrible beginning and turn things around to go on and do great things. Don't you think the punishment for such people should be that of still punishment? See, I'm still maintaining punishment. No, don't go easy. I'm not saying, but don't kill them.
Would you say that about Nazi soldiers in World War II Europe? Because what people seem to not see, no pun intended, here, is that we are in a war for the preservation of enlightened civilization against barbarians, however they became such. Broken homes, nothing that they created or caused, but here they are burning down the town and so on. What are you going to do? You are in a battlefield, and your civilization is being overrun, just like Putin's Russians in the Ukraine. This is a war to preserve or destroy civilization, and you have to take the gloves off. This isn't a question of one teenager who is caught stealing a car, and you can put him in touch with a social worker, and maybe he'll learn to go straight. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities where that's the thing to do, but this is not one of them. If you have,
but I agree with you in the context of Nazi systematic soldiers who carry guns and have got directive to do certain things. But the analogy of equating them to a 16 or 17-year-olds impressionist kids, I think it might be a little bit unfair.
I don't think so. You had the Hitler Youth back then. They were conditioned as kids to be good old red-blooded Nazis, and it just seems to me that's the comparison is quite apt. They know that they're preying on the civilization, the culture that they hate, and people who are innocent are suffering from it. You can't let that go by. The civilization is online, and you become complicit with that. If you say, well, let's just give them a break here.
So
no.
if they're a 16 years old black kid who's carrying a stick and writing, and let's say damaging some property with a stick, would be treated as a young Nazi guy who's carrying a gun.
Yes, that's because you can't pause and stop each person and say, let me read you your Miranda rights, son. It's called the fog of war. Like I heard, I hope this was not true, but that at one point, Obama had the rules of engagement in Iraq to the point where you had to recite the Miranda rights, and each prisoner of war went to trial. That's not the real world, and that is just the hyper moral decadence that will doom the West, because the oh so righteous intelligentsia are going gentle into that good night and taking the rest of us with them.
So I'm going to have to disagree on this one. I'm
That's
going to,
okay.
yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
going to,
let
yeah.
me point out my views here. I do not express these views until people perversely ask me about them. Why do they care what I think? What I'm saying has exactly the same gravity as if I were debating who's more powerful, Captain Marvel or the Martian Manhunter. What I think makes no difference. I can't help but have opinions, but I don't know why anybody would be scared of what I
I,
think or even
I'll,
care what I think. I
I'll
talk
share with
about the
you.
Bible and religion, not this stuff, until
Yeah.
I'm forced to.
Yeah, no. But I'll share with you why this one in particular is a little bit alarming. Imagine somebody comes to government and being empowered, and he is a big fan of yours, and you become an inspiration to them. And the issue, obviously, that's not going to happen in a country like the United States, because the way you make laws are completely different. You can't just come up with one person coming up with laws, but that can happen in the Middle East or some South American countries where you can come up with your own laws as a president or a sole dictator, and is in love with your ideas, and you become an inspiration. The way they misunderstood Nietzsche and the Übermensch, the Superman, and the Nazis completely distorted his idea of master and slave morality and things like that, and ended up with the Aryan race. And somebody would take this idea and say, well, you know what? I find very strong reason and logic behind Dr. Price's here. And I am going to issue a decree and a law. Any writers, any amount of writers, we bring the brigade and they just shoot them dead on the spot. All of them. Is there like few hundreds of them? There will be 300 mass shooting of 300 people on that day.
You mean people who were not caught in the act of rioting, but people who were known to have been rioters?
No, 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 no. Rioting on in the acts. They caught in the act 300 kids doing crazy stuff, and there's a law now to go and shoot them dead, all of them. And you end up in the morning with 300 bodies on the streets with different stories why they've done what they've done. Don't you think such ideas can be quite dangerous, because they might be motivated to be enacted at some point?
Well, should Nietzsche not have said what he said about the Übermensch because idiots twisted it? Oh, I better not say anything. It might be misinterpreted or misapplied. Knowledge is dangerous, but I always tell any student I have on the Bible Geek or in a classroom, you would be foolish to just brush aside what I say. I have learned a great deal about this with which you can prosper, but it would be equally stupid to just swallow anything I say because you think I'm an authority. You have to use whatever I'm providing to make up your own mind. And then in terms of the practicality of it, I think you would have a situation probably like Kent State way back before Noah's flood when I was a kid, where there was rioting going on the university campus, and they actually sent the National Guard in, and they shot, I think, four of these kids. That was the end of campus rioting in the 60s or 70s, whichever it was. You wouldn't have to make sure you kill everybody, but if people suddenly realized, oh my God, that's real ammunition, see you later, you wouldn't have. You would actually perhaps reduce the amount of violence that way. Maybe you
Yeah.
could shoot over their head. That'd be the thing to try first.
So
But
you're happy to negotiate, because you see, I'm in agreement with you. It's like
Mhm.
the Islamic law of cutting the hands of the thieves. as an atheist ex-Muslim, I'm not in disagreement that thieves should be punished. I'm in disagreement with the type of punishment. I think they need to be rehabilitated, and hopefully they come back as better citizen into the world, and that's the aim. Sometimes it's not possible. I think sometimes the logical stance,
You're
especially
talking
when
about
once like
rehabilitating criminals. How should criminals be punished? To what punishment should they be sentenced? That's not the way to look at a battlefield, which is what
oh
you're
yeah,
dealing with in the
in
kind of
agreement.
situations I'm talking about.
In agreement, absolutely. If it's a lively, so if there is a burglar that came in today and it's threatening my family, I think I'm gonna go primal. It is no, I'll have to employ my animal instincts to reason at this point and use my intellectual faculty is to be insane. I think I'm gonna have to be a bit of an ape, and for the right reason. I can understand that, but in a situation where you can reflect and you can do something, all what I'm arguing, and hopefully I can twist your mind a bit, is punishment is an order. Yes, they need to understand that this what they're doing is wrong and it's harmful to society, and they are damaging other people's properties, and they have no right to do so. However, instead of ending their life, giving them a punishment, a harsh one, if uh, that hopefully will return them back to society.
But you
And
seem to be envisioning a scenario where some kid is arrested and then they come to his cell and say, okay, now what are we going to do with you, my fine fella? Let's put him in the electric chair. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. I'm saying you are in the thick of a riot, which is a kind of urban battle where destruction is being wrought. This is not an arrest situation any more than it would be on the battlefields in Afghanistan or in Germany during the war. This is not a punishing a crime scenario we're talking about.
yeah, but you see, this might be some cultural differences, because the way, like I live in Australia, a lot of our police officers don't carry guns. The way you would treat a felon who is not carrying a gun and maybe carrying a knife or carrying a stick or threatening verbally would be completely different than somebody who's got a machine gun. One of the things about the criticism from the outside of the US is the overuse of ending life and maybe killing someone just on the suspicion of something like a concealed weapon, or somebody was carrying a knife, and people would wonder, it's like, why they're not being shot in the foot or somewhere where they can be disabled, rather than shoot. And maybe that's to do with the way America evolved over the years, and the wild west, and the gun laws in America. Maybe there is um, a mentality and an accepted culture of shooting people at this point.
I just don't think that's the case. In all these cases I have ever heard, which, was not the majority of them, obviously, but the ones I've heard, the police shoot when they think they are seeing that they're being drawn on, and that, what is that? He's taken out of his pocket and aiming at me. I don't know if it's a gun. It's happening too quickly. But should I be an experimental guinea pig and say, well, let's see if he really does mean to kill me? Oh, I guess he did. It's self-defense. If it turns out it was, they were just reaching for a can of Spam to have for lunch while you're arresting them. That's unfortunate, but you'd think people would know not to do stuff like that. Haven't they seen these things on the news? I just don't. I think you're laboring awfully hard to avoid a fairly evident conclusion that you're on the battlefield. And you have to react that way.
So maybe a definition is in order here, because sometimes the devil is in the details. What is the definition of a rioter to you?
Well, it's not just a demonstration. Like, for instance, hundreds of people blocking traffic on a bridge. That's not a riot. It's a huge pain in the rear. And I would be very irritated, but that wouldn't call for any kind of violence of any sort, even clubbing or anything. That'd be excessive. That's not a riot. But when you have people torching businesses and homes and shooting people, which happened in all over the country a couple of summers ago. That's a battle situation, or it would have been had the police not been ordered to stand by and do nothing. But had they, you would have had a battle, and you should have had one to protect the citizenry. If you
See,
can't protect them, why have any government at all? Really, you don't have any government.
that changes everything. So a writer who's holding a gun or a couple of Molotov cocktails and walking around and burning and throwing at people, and so is actually threatening other people's lives. I would conceive this to be, on the other hand, is almost like self-defense.
Mhm.
You're being shot at, you shoot back.
Mhm.
So if it's understood in this context, I'm actually in agreement.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
a kid with a crowbar breaking into a shop, 16 years old, should he be shot dead?
Well, if he I mean, it's the kind of thing you would have lawsuits for when the police are just trying to handle the situation. And then after enough of this happens, you see the result, which has happened, that people are quitting the police force, retiring early. I'm not going to risk my life to get sued by some punk. It's like there is the fog of war, and it would not be inexcusable for somebody to die in the line of fire in which they will have placed themselves. Nobody asked them to do this. And I think if it does happen, and it very likely would, the rioters have no one to blame but themselves.
Yeah, it just the amount of gray area. I was in Egypt in Egyptian Revolution. I actually left Australia to demonstrate with people, and this is where it gets to in a gray area, and I can tell you that from experience. So most of us were civil, or like holding placards, talking about, down with Mubarak, and we want a new government. After 30 odd years of ruling, it's time to go, and all that sort of stuff. But you get within the same group people from behind you who have a different interpretation of how they should handle the cause. I'm here chanting slogans, and somebody else is throwing from behind me a Molotov cocktail.
Well, I'd say in that case, the first time you hear or see that happening, demonstrations over, get the hell out of there. And if these people are left to perform their deeds, then they're the targets. But you should get the heck out, or you're gonna. And if you do nothing, you're letting the violent rioters use you as a human shield.
Yeah,
And if you go ahead.
but the argument is, when you have at some point we had like about 2 or 3 million people within the Tahrir Square
Mm.
and the other places, and you know what group euphoria can do for you, where you're chanting, you're in an emotional moment of pure romantic. You know how the revolution can be quite romantic at the same time. It's
Mhm.
quite gruesome and romantic at the same time, and you feel certainly you're a very rational type of person, but where you're put in these sort of situations, suddenly you become a machine that disperses emotions rather than rationale, and you end up in a situation. And I will be arguing here, if a tank comes and starts shooting, which we used to happen in Egypt around that time, and start driving over people, people like me who did not want to have anything to do with violence whatsoever might end up. And actually, there are examples of people who just turn up to chant or sing a couple of songs that end up being
Mhm.
minced under tanks because they were
Mhm.
in the wrong place. And that's why I'm afraid of taking the extremist, harshest stance for these sort of things, because you could end up losing some good people in the process.
Well, if you don't do that, you might end up losing a lot more. If you're turning the other cheek, that isn't necessarily guaranteeing anybody's safety.
Yeah. So I've never advocated. My current difference with you right now is
Mm.
the type of punishment. That's all. Not
But it's
there
not
should be one or
punishment.
not.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Oh, you're talking about a survival moment where you're being shot at and you shoot back to preserve your life or the livelihood of people around you. So it's a spur of the moment. It's not calculated. It's you're faced with a situation, you're being shot at, and you shoot back. Simple as that.
It's like as if you were a Frenchman fighting the Nazis in World War II. You're not trying to punish anybody. You're just trying not to get defeated and killed.
Okay, in that context, I have to agree with you. In this context, in a battlefield scenario where somebody's holding a gun or got lethal weapons, trying to end your life, and you're a police officer, you're protecting your own life and those around you. I can understand it in that context. I think the way people understood it is, and that's why I had to bring the understanding and the definition of the word rioter and what it means, because some people might have it in their head as just that 16-year-old kid with a slingshot and just breaking into a couple of shops.
Well, that's not what happened here a couple of summers ago. That was more like World War II, only without any resistance.
Yeah. Okay. So that puts this one to bed. So I'm just hoping that people got that. If they still do, I still disagree with how far should we go. But hey, I mean, and that's an area where people can always disagree. I could disagree with people on my side of the argument as well about the degree, and this is how we differ as humans. So I'm going to understand that. Now, obviously, people in the chat they're starting to have their own arguments. Humans are interesting as people. They love to really have a fight. So the chat going on, and obviously they want me to bring up the Trump situation, because this is where a lot of people disagree with you, because you can be a Republican and still don't like Trump, because Republicans, it can stand for a lot more than that. And there's a lot of Republicans who rejected Trump at some point for the things that he used to spew in terms of scientific errors and some attempts at sense of humor that end up being completely cringe moments.
Yes, aren't you glad we have Biden instead?
No. So you see, it's not a black and white fallacy here.
But
It
is with these people. They'd rather have Hitler in the White House than Trump. They have a Trumpophobia.
Yeah, no, I would not go to that far. I mean, I can reject
I
them
know
both
you
the
would.
same.
You wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd reject them both the same. I think the United States I think you, as an intellectual, deserve way more better president to represent you.
What's
Dr.
not to
Price.
like about Trump? Are people so pearl clutchingly sensitive that they said, "Oh, that's another mean tweet"? Wake up, lady, grow up. With Trump, we had clout in the world. People like ISIS and Al Qaeda, they knew what would happen to them if they killed an American, and they didn't until Biden came along. Trump made us energy independent. He brought industry back to the country and created new prosperity. He did the same by means of radical tax cutting. He did all sorts of stuff that have now been reversed completely by the people now in charge, who are wrecking the country. And some people can think only of manners. And it's like, oh, I guess I shouldn't do that. Somebody will spill their tea in shock. Grow up, people. It's just amazing to me that people could prefer somebody like Biden or these other mannequins like AOC and the guy that looks like Treebeard, John Kerry. You really think they have anything to offer? Look at their record. Look at what they want to do. A lot of them are just taking money from the Chinese communists, and of course, a lot of the Republicans are too. They're no sweethearts, and that's one reason I'm a Trump man more than just a Republican, because they tend to be do-nothing, spineless compromisers. But somebody like Trump, from outside the mess, it comes in like a bull in the china shop, and that is what we desperately need to get out of this creeping paralysis to which the left and the rhino right have brought us.
Look, I mean, Trump from the outside, there is a conviction that he's done a lot of good things within the U.S. There's some good policies, some good stuff that has happened within the U.S. Most of the criticism comes from the way he dealt with international affairs and
what was wrong with that? What did they say?
So I'll just give you. I'll give you an example about. I mean, do you believe global warming, or climate change is a thing, or is it a hoax?
I think he's right that it's a hoax, or might as well be, because even if it's real, the so-called solution of the Paris Accords and all that is a hoax. I don't know about the science, but I think I can surmise what's going on in the politics. And
Yeah, but you see,
that's where Trump differed. He wouldn't play that self-defeating game.
well, but his disagreement is not of stance. He's actually reckons the whole thing. Climate change isn't happening.
Well, I think he's probably right about that. But even if he weren't, I think the Paris climate accord thing, just like the Islamic atomic bomb thing, these are obviously extremely dangerous, inviting disaster of one kind or another, economic in one case, nuclear in the other. And they just figure as long as we've got the diplomatic process going on, everything will slow down into a glacial inertia. It won't. The day will come when those who have counted on that to lull us into sleep will strike, like China is about to do in Taiwan, like Iran is about to do in Israel. And when it happens, they'll have some sophistical explanation about how it couldn't have been stopped. And I'm really sick of that. And that's one big reason I like Trump a lot. He knew we had to crack heads and kick butt, even among our allies, who then started finally paying their way in NATO to some degree. It's just that they'll let the Dems get away with anything. And anything Trump does that obviously helps because he did it and he's not a member of the club, they'll tell you it's terrible. They once said we have to have a wall to prevent massive illegal immigration at the southern border. But once Trump says, yeah, we do need that, hey, let's build it. Oh, no, that's racist. It's so fake, and these people are such con artists. Trump wasn't. I don't know if he ever had an affair with what's her name, the stripper,
Stormy Daniels.
Nor do I care. That's not. You didn't vote on who to get the Boy Scout merit badge this time. You voted on people that will get things done and put your country first, just as the French should have a leader that will see to their interests first, and all the other ones, which Trump said. He never said we should advance our interests at the expense of everyone else. He was very clear about that. But people would rather lie about him being a racist and all that. It's just disgraceful, and we have a suicidal, decadent culture here.
So I'm just going to challenge one area, because this is the area that interests me the most: how your brain functions, Bob. And it's very logical and it's very methodical when it comes to certain biblical criticism, human affairs. Then on the issue of climate change, where we have had many presentations on the science behind it, proof, numbers, evidence, multiple science communicators, the likes of Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, lots of
Oh, those
prominent.
guys are frauds.
You reckon Neil
Bill
deGrasse
Nye
Tyson?
is just a party clown. He has no real scientific
I know he's an
education or
engineer. I
expertise, and the
understand.
other guy's just a publicity hog.
Yeah. So who's a real scientist in your opinion?
Well,
What
not
about
me,
what
but
about
not
Lawrence
them.
Krauss?
That's like Dr. Fauci. Oh, come on. This guy's
Yeah.
Mengele, and he's in charge of the viruses and the plagues, which he actually helped create. Like, these people are all a regime of rotten characters, and Trump, whatever his faults, isn't playing that game. And with the climate change, I've heard many different people say, let me tell you why this climate change thing is a hoax. And they sound pretty convincing, and there are many of them, and they never are allowed into the relevant scientific journals. They're barred from these conferences, and it's all one-sided. And that, you know what that means, why they're suppressing things that they're afraid are true, like the COVID thing. Isn't it obvious what's going on when you give immunity from pretty funny from prosecution to the drug companies, so that if they do wind up making things worse, they don't have to worry about it? And they argue against and lie about things like this. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. The whatever it is, hydrochloroquine, yeah. And that's the angel on my shoulder in the other room. That you can buy that cheap. It's been available and used harmlessly for 50 years. But oh no, we've got to start scaring people away from that, because the big pharma companies in bed with the FDA, who run the FDA, won't make billions out of that. But out of these untested vaccines, there's like 8 new billionaires. Like, where is the suspicious nature of the left? Where'd it go? They're in cahoots with the principalities and powers. They need a subversive like Trump.
So by the same logic, intelligent design, Michael Behe and co, and being barred from scientific conferences because it's non-science, and making a Netflix documentary called Outcast, and it's a very similar. You've got that situation where you say, why? Well, there are some scientists who are opposed to climate change, but their story is never told. But isn't this the very same angle the intelligent designers
That's
sort
a
of use?
circular argument by analogy. The very thing at issue is the question of whether these dissenting voices are to be dismissed as cranks. That's what we don't know, because no one allows an open debate. You've got debates between intelligent design hucksters and other evolutionary scientists. I've been to some, but that doesn't happen with the climate thing. There is an orthodoxy, and you'll just be dealt out of the game immediately. So we never know.
What
We're
would be
never
the game, though?
allowed to know.
Yeah, what would be the motivation of civilization conspiring and cahooting together to get rid of fossil fuel and go into a cleaner? We understand. We've seen how our planet recovered in the last 2.5 years because of lack of transportation and of COVID, and how the barrier reefs have recovered, and certain things of actually our air was better for it, and a few things have recovered because of our lack of human activity. It looks like human activity, inevitably, because we interested in science and different endeavors, has its own side effects. We understand that, and we understand that it's all about sustainability. It's like you've got a certain amount of food, please don't eat it all in one day, otherwise you'll starve tomorrow, sort of thing. It's quite reasonable. What would be the motivation to come up with such hoax?
Well, to control the economy, like AOL, what's her name? AOC. I mean, what's the difference? Her chief strategist admitted forthrightly and publicly the new Green Deal was not about the environment. It was an excuse to gain control of the economy. to shut down. Look what they did with the oil and gas industry. And now poor old skeleton Biden is trying to get the Arabs and the Russians to do this, which he is too pure to do, even though our product with oil and natural gas and all that is much purer and environmentally friendly. They don't give a damn about that. It's about control. They don't want people to drive. They say, why don't you just drive a gas-powered car? Why don't you buy one of these zillions of dollars Tesla cars? Yeah, you ought to be able to do that, Ralph Cramden. It's just absurd, and they're trying to restrict the motion of people. That's what the pointless and destructive COVID lockdowns were all about. Divide and conquer. It just seems to me that I smell a whole bunch of rats with everything these people do. The masks, which they at first admitted would do no good, then they saw an advantage in it and did tell everybody to use one or two or three. And they knew that from science that the young kids were not at risk for this, but let's ruin their education by making a mask up for 8 hours a day. Like, how can anybody look at this and see it as innocence? It could be the most incompetent Keystone Cops government in history, but I give them a little more credit for not being total imbeciles. I think the indications converge. We have a government that not only hates America and its tradition, but seeks basically to dominate its population to serfhood, to serve the elite of the Davos crowd. And again, this is what the left used to cry foul on, but not anymore, because they're in the driver's seat along with Lex Luthor. I mean, Bill Gates and these guys. It just seems to me it's like a Marvel movie that Gates and his buddies are like the Red Skull. It's like incredible, and that's I mean, this. Of course, my rantings here really are just hot air. They have no effect, and in fact, it surprises me that anybody cares what I think. I mean, it's like, do they really care?
We very
What does
much care.
Price think about UFOs? What do they care what I think? I don't care what I think. It's just if we want to shoot the breeze about it, I'm willing to do it. But I'm really surprised anybody thinks my views are so important they have to get upset over them.
So, do you think? Because sometimes I've been listening to you, and I'm thinking in my head here. Your mythicism with regards to Jesus, and do you think your brain does not like salt and pepper plain stories? If it acts like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck sort of thing. Now maybe it's something else wearing a duck suit. So do you think you've got a colorful brain that does not want to accept straightforward situations and want to
What is straightforward about what the government is doing on any front? I mean, they're practically saying, hey, those conspiracy theories, they're all real. Or if it was Biden, he'd whisper it into the mic. You can't tell me there is any transparency or that anything makes sense short of a conspiracy theory. And, there have been conspiracies. The notion of ridiculing something, it's a conspiracy theory. You mean that's
it do happen?
There are not real conspiracies? Because I think history has shown there are a bunch.
Yes, I'm in agreement. They do happen. Otherwise, the term wouldn't be even around for us to talk about. They're there, but how it's clever to differentiate between a real one and one that is fine-tuned by those who are attracted to those sort of analogies. And I'll say colorful personalities sort of are always attracted. They don't like plain stories.
Well, I never thought certain things were to be taken seriously. And then I was open-minded enough to say, I'm beginning to change my mind on that. It's sort of like David Hume's argument against miracles. You
Mhm.
shouldn't accept a report of a miracle unless all the other available alternatives are even more outlandish. And in that case, it starts looking pretty good. And I've come to that point on theories of the Bible, on political and scientific things many times. And by the way, with mythicism, I don't view that as a conspiracy theory. Those who do are the ones that think that that Don Draper and the Madison Avenue ad men came together and concocted Christianity as if they were plotting a new sitcom. There are people that do that. That's an absurd conspiracy theory approach. I'm merely saying that it's like Thomas Kuhn says in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, that with any pretty comprehensive paradigm that rules the field for a good while, like Ptolemaic astronomy, where it's geocentric and so on. It seemed to answer things. You could use a sextant based on that and navigate adequately. But Copernicus said, yeah, but there's that anomalous data. Why do the planets occasionally move in retrograde patterns? What is going on? Well, Aristotle and people said it was because they're conscious entities and kind of get tired of going the same path and occasionally want to dance around. Well, Copernicus said, no, there's got to be a scientific explanation, a mathematical one. And so he figured out that, hey, you could solve this if the observation platform you're on, the Earth, is not the stationary center, but one of the planets. So it is moving in its own right as the others are, and that creates the optical illusion of retrograde motion. Bingo! That incorporated most of the traditional view, but put it on a new footing, and it answered things even better. Well, I think I have to be open to the smoking gun, like where there's smoke, there's fire. And there are a number of places in the Bible where you have a kind of a safe, honed down version that people won't find too outrageous. But what about these odd things where Jesus seems to be a revolutionary, an armed attacker on the temple? What the heck? What's that doing there? And then you begin to say, now let me start from there and see how everything would fit. Well, mythicism is another one of those things. If that were true, that would explain an awful lot of otherwise odd things. But that's all it is. It's an experimental paradigm. At least for me, it is not a dogma. I'm not, I guess I'm not a good mythicist because I just favor that one among the possibilities, but I don't rule anything out.
Fair
So
enough.
I don't believe I'm some kind of tinfoil hat type who gravitates to theories that are more like comic books.
So you would like to see a debate on climate change. You want to see those who you reckon they've been shut down to have a public platform where they're going to
Mm.
put forward their evidence, and you will be the judge of that at the end, and you will go with who presents the better of evidence.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Okay,
Like
so
even when I ditched fundamentalism, I still looked into evolution and creation because I thought I don't want to just switch teams and accept the party line. Is it possible evolution isn't the right thing? And are there big holes in creationism? And I wound up thinking that I understood both better than I had, and that yeah, evolution gets the trophy. But even there, I felt like I had to look at the data. I couldn't just believe so-called experts because they're all advocates on one side or another, probably for good reasons that I don't yet know. So I'd have to familiarize myself, and a debate would be a great way of doing it.
I'm in agreement with you for the reason you don't leave one belief or one cult or one group of people thinking just to fall into another. You employ the same tools that led you to leave the first position at all times. So
Mm.
even when there's something that is going to challenge your comfort zone, even being the new scientific, maybe atheistic or whatever approach, and not being able to challenge that, it's very similar to the very position that you left in the first place. So canceling people and canceling groups of people, even though deep down they might end up being wrong, but canceling them from the word go might actually raise suspicions. Why are you doing that? If you're so confident about your position, why aren't you entertaining the idea? Beat it fair and square in front of everyone. There shouldn't be there anything to hide. So I'm with you on this one.
Transparency.
Yeah, I would tend to go for that, because that's the position we left. We had the religious folks would shut other people up at some point and say, no, you don't talk like that in our church. So how is it any different when you switch teams? You'd want to leave that away, far away from you, and you go, no, I'm so confident in my position. Or even better, I can hold a belief and still be healthily skeptic about it, that if a better one comes along, I'm able to go where the evidence leads rather than my own newly adopted belief.
Yeah, because I want the truth, not some particular current candidate for the job. So they're always secondary. I want to take them seriously, but I don't just tie my wagon to them. I'm hoping they perhaps are headed in the right direction, and I guess I'll find out. But that's the thing. It's not like Socrates on his deathbed said, speak not of Socrates, but rather of the truth. And I think that's a great way to approach all these things.
I agree with you on the topic of transgenders. That is obviously, I mean, homosexuality is no longer controversial in my opinion.
Right? Yes.
We understand the science behind it. We know how it works. We know that it doesn't pose any harm. We know that they're always going to be contained to 5 to 7% of mammals at all times. It's going to be always that, and they have their own brain structure, and they can be quite creative, and they are. They can do wonderful things, from Alan Turing to all these wonderful people, to Steve Jobs. However, the area of transgenders, this is a bit of a grayish area. This is a bit of an area where confusion and a lot of things can come along. And you have voiced your opinion on this one here and saying, hold on a minute, I don't have any problems with anyone who wants to change for whatever reason, transition, because they believe that they are this or that. It's how we are dealing with it, and especially when it comes to children. So maybe if you can shed some more light on that area.
Well, you pretty much said it right there. My sole concern is that in order to one of the big postmodern dogmas, though I am postmodernist in many ways, but one of the things I don't like is that this idea that everything is a social construction. Well, almost everything is, like Peter Berger and Thomas Luckman have shown, money systems, all kinds of things. But what they're trying to do is to recruit people, get kids to say, don't you really want to change? You don't really feel like a boy, do you? And they're hiding it from the parents, and then lying about hiding it from the parents, and so forth. They have no right to do that. These kids are not in a position to make a decision like that that's going to affect their whole lives. And there are numerous people, well, there's a bunch of instances, I don't know, probably not most, but there's a lot of instances of people getting the surgical change and everything, and then committing suicide. They now think they've made a mistake that they cannot undo, and oh, good God! But then there are others who didn't go that far, but say, I never should have done that, and now I'm warning people to think twice. Okay, it backfires. A lot of things do, but there are people whom I assume really, like I would say Bruce Jenner becoming Caitlyn Jenner. I don't have any problem calling her her. With anybody like that, I've met transgender people. I don't think, oh, look at that weirdo. No, I take individuals as they come. The more diverse, the better. So that's not a problem for me. It's just that let's not shove this on kids because we want to recruit enough people to vindicate our theory that this is socially constructed. They're trying to make it a social construct. So there's an insidious side to this, but it's not the phenomenon itself. So some people can't seem to see the difference, but I'm
Do,
not transphobic. I'm saying, wait just a minute. It's a question of timing.
do you think that the world or humanity is suffering from guilt of days past, and they're employing affirmative action in order to compensate for the atrocities of the past, and sometimes they
They
go a
are,
little
but
bit.
that's never going to work. I think you're exactly right. Boy, we never gave so and so minority an even break. Let's overcompensate now. No, no, you mustn't do that because the people you're trying to help will suffer because no one will take them seriously. I mean, I've known instances, situations in schools I've taught in where they were explicit about giving a job to a guy who was a native African. He was there to teach African and Islamic religions. He said stuff that showed me he did not understand basic things about Islam. You know why he got the job. And the problem is not only do you wind up getting more and more mediocre people without skills in various fields, but the people of the minority status who do have the skills are always they're always afraid people are going to say, well, this guy just got the job because he's purple, and so they can't shine when they should. And so to me, this is a terrible idea. You can't just say, let's pretend that everybody had equal opportunity, and so let's parcel out the jobs and the prizes and all that. No. You got to start back with decent education and preparation, and then your problem will be solved. But how boneheaded can the leaders be? Pretty boneheaded, I'd say. That's not the way to do it, and it works against the people you're trying to help.
Um, so I'm not sure about. Okay, the current situation is you're saying certain things that could harm society and it could harm other people, and therefore you should not be given a platform um, to speak and to explain your ideas. One of the things I didn't like very much when I told you, and I saw some shorts of your video,
Mhm.
and people start to circulate the 2 minutes video of you giving snap answers, or they
Mm.
seem to be snap answers.
Am I
Um,
capable of giving a snap answer?
no, no, that's why I thought something was fishy.
Mm.
uh, but once you watch the whole thing, there are certain things I still disagree, and these are the things we can continue to have a dialogue about. And you
Mm.
could convince me one day, I could convince you one day,
Mhm.
and that's how life is.
Mm.
But the repercussion, what is the repercussion of starting to cancel every idea that we don't like? I, I'm I don't like that approach. I've never liked it. In certain, but things need to be understood in certain contexts. I've been told by a friend of mine not to mention his situation and his name because he wants to remain that way. Uh, but the pressure he was put under, and I feel and I support him. He's a good friend of mine. Um, I think it was unfair. It was unfair. Have we reached a situation where uh, that group mentality of getting together and say, well, this person is out of the intellectual realm forever?
Mm.
He said certain things that are not tasteful. We're not going to argue. We're not going to try to understand why he said them. We're not going to try to understand them in the context. We're not going to try to see if he was saying them for a certain reason. We're going to stop the conversation. What is your stance on that?
It's like Dr. McCoy said in Star Trek 4. We're dealing with medievalism here, Jim. That is just like persecuting heretics and shutting them up because knowledge is dangerous. And of course it is dangerous, but that's the risk, because you will not have the great advantages that knowledge brings. And it's a tightrope act, but you can't just cut off access to the tree of knowledge for fear of what might happen. It's back to the Middle Ages, banners flying, as Clarence Darrow once said. And it just shows no confidence in the human intelligence. We don't trust people to really think adequately, but we do, because we're omniscient. So we'll just say, hey, pal, just sit back down and leave the thinking to us. And if you start that pesky thinking, you're going to get thrown off the bus. Like, how does anybody not see that that is wrong and self-destructive? How are you going to learn anything? How are you going to learn to avoid certain things that some outcast might have understood? And what's the problem if they do have a mistaken idea? You'd probably find out quickly enough once scientists are all making the theory run the gauntlet, which they always do, because that's a scientific method. You want to find out if you're wrong, if you're actually a scientist and not just a paid hack. But I think it's incredibly dangerous to just enforce someone's defined orthodoxy in any field.
Well, I've titled this conversation all these, the whole ethnic discrimination and the things that divide us. These are the things that divide us, because we end up in silos. This is the Republican. This is a Democrat. Do you have any Democrat friends?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have a bunch of them and always have. In fact, like just about everybody in the atheist and free thought communities are Democrats or green or whatever, which is why I keep getting fired and excommunicated. The Lovecraft fans, most of them are leftists, which is why I keep getting excommunicated. And now the Bible people are enforcing a dogma. And with mythicism, by the way, one prominent New Testament scholar freely admitted in a published book in a public forum that in his school they would automatically reject a job application from a mythicist, no matter what credentials he or she held. I mean, that's something to be proud of, isn't it? It might be kookery, but you're kind of assuming it without giving it a fair shake. That's the way to do it. To look at it and say, I just don't think we can endorse the teaching of Christian Science and Mary Baker Eddy here at the medical school at Harvard. I'm afraid we can't do that. You can make one thing look like the other. You can the chiropractors can say, oh, we're being badmouthed, they're prejudiced against us. They say we're quacks. Well, I think there is evidence that maybe they are quacks, though I'm no expert in it. But there's got to be a way of determining such things with some probability. And I think I can tell whether a mythicist or a historicist or whatever is offering bad arguments, no matter what the end result is. And so can any competent scholar. But we don't want to take that chance.
See, I agree with you on this one here, because we're the discipline. Natural sciences are different. So if you have a flat earther, it's trying to be a geologist and professor, you go, no, this is objectively has been verified. But when you talk about a discipline where you go back as a forensic scientist, trying to stitch the puzzle pieces together, you cannot understand or know anything at 100% confidence. You're trying to infer what really happened. So therefore, anybody with a different hypothesis should not be outcast, because we don't know these things at 100% value like we understand natural sciences, and therefore that should be up for a healthy debate.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
So
much more slippery in the so-called human sciences.
yes,
And people are aware of that to the degree that there are various competing schools of psychotherapy, because it's not exactly a science. It's very speculative and theoretical. It does seem to help some people. But they realize this is not locked up, and the very pluralistic practice of the different subfields is a way of experimenting. Let's see how well these things do. There's no problem there. You don't make somebody a heretic.
well, that's why Freud is seen as a pseudoscientist at this point.
Yeah, I don't understand that personally. Freud continually sheds light on things for me. So does Jung, and a lot of these guys. I take the approach that Lady Strauss and Derrida called bricolage. It's you have a kind of a ragtag toolkit of theories and methodologies that you can't necessarily fit together theoretically, but you find that each one of them produces some results. So you say, oh, well, it fit this one. You don't know how it fits together, but you kind of assume maybe one day I'll find out. But in the meantime, really, who cares? All of them work. Why not take that approach? And that certainly is true in Jesus studies, where you have like 10 viable possibilities as to who the historical Jesus was. None of them are ridiculous. They all make some sense of some gospel material, but then you have to discount others that don't fit. And that's real tough to be sure about, but it's worth pursuing.
A question here for you from one of the viewers. Do you see the left synonym with anarchy?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. In fact, I think the ultimate goal of organized leftism is a state-controlled populace, like in the Soviet Union, which was socialist, not communist in the technical sense, because socialism is the threshold of communism, which means the state has withered away. We don't need it, and we have a return to the theorized primitive anarchy. No crime, no police, like John Lennon's song Imagine. In order to do that, they have to eliminate dissenters and control everybody else, lest people start misbehaving. And so I think leftism involves bullying, surveillance, and population control, whereas anarchism wants to jump right into the no government. I remember out in Berkeley, I would occasionally see bumper stickers I thought were hilarious. One of them said, no government is, there's no government like no government. And another one was hilarious and said, US out of America. There are people that just figure, the cops are the cause of police. I had a friend who thought that. There are people like that, and I think that is anarchism and would be very dangerous. So I don't equate the two, though they overlap in some ways, but
Yeah,
in the most
no,
important ways, no.
I tend to agree with the same views. I don't think anarchism is the same as socialism or communism, for that matter. It seeks to control via employing different regimes. Said the Big Brother. I think Animal Farm in 1984 kind of summed it up quite nicely.
Look what happened to Emma Goldberg, I think her name was, right? She was a veteran anarchist, and once the October Revolution happened, they tossed her in the jail. I mean, that tells a lot.
Yeah, they've probably been used by other groups to cause havoc and for them to pave the way for a different system to come on. But it's always going to be systems that will take over. It's never going to be chaos. If chaos takes over, I think that'll be the end of civilization as we know it. So I'm in agreement in that area. Again, I'll find myself agreeing with a lot of things you're saying once I understand the context. I think the only things that people are stopping at right now, and this is where rallied different academics to say, hey, I'm not coming to the same platform that hosts Dr. Price, where maybe some of the ideas lead to certain actions, because, as you know, beliefs inform actions, and actions have consequences. So if you have a certain belief that a certain thing needs to be treated that way, it might end up in the wrong hands and might end up being employed in a distorted way, giving rise to horrible scenes. Do you think these academics maybe should have had a word with you?
I don't even know who they're talking about. The only one known to me personally, if this is correct, is Dennis MacDonald, who himself is a communist, which is fine by me. I don't care. So I don't know where they're all at, and even who the other ones are. And frankly, I'd be very surprised if any of them even know who I am. My books are not published by the high class outfits that do theirs. I don't have a teaching post at a university. I'm a Bob who. I don't assume that I'm really known beyond a kind of a subset of free thought and atheist skeptics. So I'm a little suspicious of this whole thing. In fact, I kind of suggest that the one scholar, not MacDonald, who has a wife and a mistress, the mistress being a hysterical henpecker, that she has a website where she fulminates against conservatives and so on. Called well, I'll leave it at that. I suspect she's the one that badgered her boyfriend into telling our friend that there was this legion of academics, that might be so, but it just seems kind of odd to me. But who knows? It's now moot anyway to me.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, these things have been said, and certain people have taken certain actions, and we live in a new reality where, one of your favorite platforms is where you're appearing on regular basis, and it's probably gonna not happen anymore. Um, I'm just trying to understand that have we lost or have we gained something? These ideas of yours, you don't go out of your way usually to, as you said, to express them. Um, but maybe were they? I wanted to understand the context of this. Were they hunted down from previous lives and previous bits and pieces to ignite the situation, or were these things were said recently?
That could be it. I remember he said he emailed a whole bunch of these people with whom he's in touch because of the show. Maybe he said, get a load of this. What do you think? Should we excommunicate this guy? But I don't know. That's pure speculation on my part. But
Yeah. Yeah, I'm for myself. I am going to continue my relationship with both of you.
mm,
Um, I'm going to be able. I'm hoping to be able to disagree with you
mm.
on certain occasions. You can disagree with me, and
That doesn't bother me one iota.
oh no, yeah, I'm just worried. I'm genuinely worried about the world we're heading
Mm,
into. If we gonna, you know, abandon each other just at the, just because you're not exactly a carbon copy of me, I'm getting
mm,
worried. I'm getting worried that we're not able to change our ideas in a dialogue where you can convince me of something new. I can convince you of something new. The repercussions of real life, like we talked about the transgender situation. We didn't really delve in. Maybe this is an area where we can go a little bit deeper and we can end at that. Um, where there are a lot of speculation from the outside, but at the end of the day, these are people going through certain things, and they have certain brain chemistry and certain subjective experience they're going through. They might be not comfortable. They might be on the verge of ending their own life. They might be quite creative and they want to free themselves from that jail so they can produce something for humanity, and it's only blocked because they cannot express themselves freely. There's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of nuances that if we start dealing with things superficially from the outside, we're going to miss out on so many opportunities to
Mm.
probe the human mind. And that's my
Yeah.
fear.
Hmm.
That's my greatest fear, that we're going to end up being superficial people who will idealize certain figures, and these people will say, right, we go right, left, we go left, and we lose our independence. Uh, on the transgender situation, you've explained it. You've said you don't have any problem with that person.
No, no, not at all.
So with the pronouns, I know that this is it can get out of hand, but let's say a friend of yours, a good friend of yours, and that friend end up being a she at some point, and they wanted to be called a she and her, and I know you said, look, I'm not going to be told what to do, but I have a strange feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, that in the right context, you will have empathy
Oh,
and
I
human
said that
way above.
on the
Yeah.
show. I said like Bruce Caitlyn Jenner. I wouldn't think of saying he or him anymore. It's pretty clear where he's at. Who is it? I mean, she's at now, and I don't have any problem with that, and I don't with anybody else who has decided that they're this identity. In a sense, it's not in principle different from legally changing your name.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot more of a big deal, but it's kind of analogous to it. I don't have a problem with that. What I resist is the idea that I or anyone else is liable for not keeping a scorecard as to several possible pronouns and neologisms that somebody in one of the supposedly scores of genders. I'm not making that up. I don't understand it, but I know that somehow that is the case, the claim. If I have to memorize all that as if I'm learning the conjugation in another language, I'm not bothering with that. I'm not in that world. And if somebody doesn't like it, that's their problem. It's offense taken, not offense given. I'm under no obligation.
So here,
It shouldn't be a slight if I don't know them well enough. Whereas if I do know them and I refuse to go along with it, that's insulting. So I wouldn't do that. But
yeah.
I think it's a pretty clear line to draw.
Chris is disagreeing. He's saying, well, you did name Jenner twice on the show numerous times and used the wrong pronouns. Your claim that you wouldn't is just false by your own actions. So,
I'm just the absent-minded adjunct instructor. I mean, I can't remember my own name half the time. It's not an ideal, and the approach Chris is taking is inquisitorial. Who cares what I say? It's unimportant, and I'm just like half the time I'm thinking, oh yeah, what's his name? And I can't recall someone's name. That shouldn't be an ideological insult in the failure to keep this straight and casual, fast conversation on my end. If you're going to get upset about that, there's a lot more serious stuff to be upset about.
yeah. I will ask, please, the viewers not to, insult any of my current friends at the moment. So I'm just gonna remove, things that are not appropriate, because as you can see, guys, we're having a decent conversation, and hopefully we're not trying to hunt each other's mistakes. I tried to call you. I said I'll call you Bob in this episode and I called you Dr. Price because the human brain can err.
That's
You
right.
can. It doesn't mean it's a reflection of your own convictions. The convictions have been on display. Dr. Price said exactly what he thinks. If there was and people might say, "Oh, it's a Freudian slip." That's exactly how you think inside, but then we people are attacking you for exactly speaking your mind. So, are you that brave person who speaks their mind, or sometimes are you politically correct? Because you've displayed you are not. You are going to say what you believe in, no matter what. So, I would tend to think that this was just a slip of the tongue or an error, or a memory situation. So, I would not say that this is how you really think.
I don't even remember what I said. It's it's blown up into an issue when it isn't one. And for he's right there. Whoever said this, I'm not sure. Chris could be male or female. This it's a Freudian slip. Could be. There are such things, but then again, there's also just a kind of muscle memory of your mouth where you say what you're used to saying and can't quite nail down the new thing you should have you tried to adopt and adjust to. I wouldn't judge it myself.
Yeah. Well, Sue is sort of accused our friend, and that there's a difference, Sue, between judging somebody's stance and judging their own character. So please, there's a difference. There's a difference between I don't disagree with Doctor Bob's stance on this situation because of 1, 2, and 3, or go outright and calling Dr. Price names just because I don't like his stance. There are different ways of tackling issues, and here is the problem, Dr. Price. This is the issue. Is a lot of people who admire you so much and have liked you for many years. It's exactly like the Michael Jackson situation. Or any of these famous people that we grew up to love or admire, and then we discover something dark about them at some point, something that we disagree with, and you go out telling the world, I'm no longer going to be listening to Michael Jackson songs, but in your car, in your lunch break, there's Beat It or Billie Jean playing while you're having your sandwich, and secretly still admire the guy. That conflict in the human brain of you admiring somebody so much and disagreeing with their stance on a certain topic, how do we deal with this?
Yeah, I think it's fairly simple in principle. Roland Barthes, the great structuralist critic, spoke of the death of the author. Like when you interpret a text you're reading, and you find out later that the author didn't Carol and I wrote this book on the lyrics of Rush's songs, and we sent a copy of it to Neil Peart, and he wrote back and said that on the song Middletown, he had intended it a different way than we understood it, but that's okay because the text is yours to interpret. I mean, suppose nobody ever asked him, and now terribly he's gone. Then suppose some Rush fanatic like Carol and me were concerned to know, I gotta know what Neil meant by that. Well, it's too late. You can't know that. Isn't that a clue to something? Mustn't the text be intelligible apart from the unknown interpretation of its creator? And Roland Barthes said, well, yeah. And that's because once created, the text has a life of its own. The author is, when he looks back over it, he has now become simply a reader of the text. The text speaks for itself. And the thing that convinced me that was correct was I heard Stephen King saying that his novel Carrie was really about the awakening power of women. Because Carrie has her period during the thing and has a real rough time with her peers at school. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, this rings a bell. And I knew that I had read in King's other book, Danse Macabre, a nonfiction book about fiction. He comments on William Peter Blatty's book, The Exorcist, where he says, where Blatty said, yeah, or I guess King said, what this is about And there's an almost exactly similar scene where Reagan is masturbating with a crucifix while she's possessed. King said, "You see what that's about is she has reached puberty and it scares the hell out of her mother." Well, I thought, Steve, don't you see that is obviously what Carrie is about? You are reading your book wrong. Now, that sounds ridiculous, but in that moment, I thought, no, the text speaks for itself. He got it when Blatty's text said that, but somehow he missed it in the text he wrote, because all writers are channeling from their subconscious and don't understand what they've put on paper necessarily. I've looked back at stuff I've written and said, wow, that's a pretty good foreshadowing. And then I realized I didn't have that in mind. And that's just the weird way it works. The text is what is normative. And that shows that letting the intention of the author govern the meaning of it is like the ad hominem fallacy, that you like or don't like something because you don't like the person who created it. What does that have to do? You're not being asked to render judgment on this person. You don't even need to know anything about him. It's just the book. What do you make of that? We're not having a let's gossip about Stephen King party. We're discussing a book. And I think that's the thing here. Michael Jackson was some kind of a weirdo, they say. Does that affect whether his music is enjoyable or not? Heidegger was a member of the Nazi party. Well, that's too bad. I mean, maybe he's frying in hell right now. I don't know. But I don't see that as affecting his philosophy, which seems very helpful to me. The one is not the other. And if you realize that, a lot of these problems vanish.
I would imagine now Isaac Newton being cancelled for his alchemy cuckoo ideas.
Yeah, can't have that.
It would have. Dr. Price, do you have another 15 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
So in the next 15 minutes, folks, because I want this to be not just a conversation between critical faculty and Dr. Price, but there are a few people here who would come from different platforms where you're being hosted, some friends of the channel here. And I want people to be part of this, because this is not just about, to me, this is not just about Dr. Price. This is about a certain direction that humanity is taking right now. And we want to start handling this, because if this is going to be our future and our way of handling these situations, because they're not going to stop from happening. There'll be another favorite persons of yours who is going to fall from grace at some point because he said something that wasn't liked by some other group. Are we going to be mature enough to be able to deal with this in a certain way? Or are we always going to put people on the sword all the time? And when do we draw the line? So I want people to ask hard questions. And I do love that Dr. Price doesn't shy away from a challenge. He loves it. I think you're embracing it at this point. But while people are preparing their questions, would you call a white person who is committing a felony or doing something violent and without fairness a thug?
Sure.
Okay. So
it
because
referred originally to Asian Indians anyway.
Yes.
It wasn't Africans or anything. But it doesn't matter. It just means some sort of a violent predator or something.
Yeah. You see, I'm a linguist. One of the things that I've done in my life is playing with languages, and words don't freeze in time. If the word gay was frozen in time, would mean completely something different. People used to bid each other a gay day, some 80
Don,
years
we now are gay apparel.
Exactly. So words are not frozen in time. They change meanings. And sometimes they get divorced completely from the first reason why they came about, and they end up being used for a different. right now, the people who don't understand the background of the word thug and how has it been used and the historical context, they will use it as anybody who is violent. Like even like in a football game where they just starting a punch up and throwing beer and popcorn at people, and they start calling, oh, he's a thug,
Yeah,
without even
thuggish
realizing.
behavior.
Yeah. So when you mentioned that word, was it mentioned in that context?
Well, what baffles me about this is the people in the wake of the whole original mess said that it's racist to use the word thug because that implies blacks are thugs. And I thought, you don't understand. It's just that a predator, a certain rough character criminal is a thug. You're the one that is inculcating unwittingly racism by making that equation. I would never suggest and never have that blacks are thugs or thugs are all black. That somebody is just wrong on that one. I tell you how wrong that is. A black college dean was fired because he used the word niggardly, meaning cheap, and niggardly. And they said, oh, he's using the N word. No, stupid. It's not that word. But we have to bow before ignorance. Not me. I mean, if I know somebody is too ignorant to know what the English language means, okay, then I'll try to adjust it, maybe hand language or sign language or something. But you can't just start caving into ignorance, the weaker brethren of the Bible, because then everybody becomes the weaker brethren. You make the low standard the standard for everybody, so nobody will feel left out. That you are doing nobody a favor. And I think this, though a small one, is an example of that.
Okay, so it was not okay. So the word, I mean, even the word, like words like boy and things that used to have certain connotation in the past are being sort of employed differently now. And I can understand that, unless you mean exactly that. So when probed, I think the right stance and the logical stance is, if you're doubt of the employment of the word, you're going to say, what do you mean by this word? And if the person insists in using that word in that context, then they are damned, or not, because unless you want to see them in the wrong, unless you don't like them very much, unless you want to see them suffer. So, I'll coach you red-handed. You said the words, uh, and the context is gone and everything is gone. So I'm hoping that we are in a genuine world where people are really concerned with the truth. I think this is the key word. If we're going to end up with one key word here today, is concern for the truth. Do we want to find out the truth, or we find out our own truth, our own subjective truth, where we just happy and singing kumbaya with our own groups, people who look like us, and anybody who looks slightly different than us, anybody who would act slightly different than us, they are outcast, are gone, without entertaining, without asking why are they saying the things they're saying.
Amen.
Yeah. So folks, you can start writing your questions. He's a first. Was George Zimmerman a thug?
I don't remember enough about that. All I know is that he was followed by Trayvon Martyr and thought he was being stalked and was in danger. But I forget exactly what happened. Was there an encounter in which Zimmerman needlessly killed him? Was that what it was? I've gotten foggy on the
Was that the
details.
young kid who ended up killing a couple of people? Was that the young kid? I'm not quite sure. I remember the incident, but
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say.
Yeah, same here. I'm not complete. There's so
Because
many.
the answer would depend on what the heck Zimmerman did, and I can't
e-
quite remember. But if he
Exactly.
acted in a thuggish way, I wouldn't hesitate to call him a thug.
Um, Here's from Amr. Uh, don't you think your political ideology shapes or highly contributes to your COVID skepticism? Science denial is pretty shocking considering the tremendous research that has been done on COVID.
I don't trust that. I'm sorry, but the government has utterly shattered its credibility to me, and especially the very dubious way they've dealt with it. Coming this close to forcing everybody to get this untested vaccine and suppressing the use of a cheap vaccine that would not make the big pharma companies make a whole lot of money, which they did. So I am very suspicious of it. I've been vaccinated for other things repeatedly. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but this strikes me as they have made it sound dubious, and I'm not going to take the risk. And so far, it's been worth it. No problem.
So do you think this, because we're talking about a worldwide phenomena. This is not a US matter. This is something that's global. So do you think so? I'm triple vaccinated and I'm about to have my fourth one because I want to travel overseas. I've looked into the science of it. I have not suffered any side effects. For now, my critical faculties, as the my channel's name, are still intact. So maybe
Well, there are a
there's.
bunch of people that aren't that lucky. And I just figure it just I'm not gonna. They want me to do it so badly. That in itself raises my antenna. And the fact that this is a world phenomenon really doesn't change it, because the people promoting it are also worldwide in their scope. Some of the same people have introduced vaccinations in sub-Saharan Africa, leading to an epidemic of sterility. And that's one of the things happening to a lot of people, obviously not most, with this. And so I think there are reasons really to be suspicious of this. I no longer think that anybody in the government is really interested in the welfare of its citizens. And that's a relatively new thing for me. I'm disillusioned.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the villain now from the Avengers, the guy with the gauntlet who snapped his finger to. Uh,
Thanos.
yeah, Thanos, correct. Do you think this is a Thanos sort of project?
Well, my first thought was, there is a dimension of this where some of the elites, like the Davos crowd, wants to substantially reduce the population. And they're a little bit vague on how, but some people that take this are becoming unable to conceive. Well, I think of Bill Gates more like as Lex Luthor. A couple of years ago, he proposed this thing that he wouldn't even have needed government permission for somehow, to send up planes to disperse clouds of tiny metal slivers that would dim the light and heat of the sun so as to lower the Earth's temperature. Like, oh yeah, that sounds real safe. And this guy could just do it with his money. He wouldn't even have to ask anybody. He's buying up all the farmland in the country, and he's anti-meat. Don't tell me none of that is suspicious. And these people are active all over the world with the same kind of thing. And so there's reason to worry here. I don't know, but boy, I never thought this way about any other medical procedure, the Salk vaccine or anything. It just seems to me they are asking to be suspected all over the world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it seems that you still have a few supporters, a few people, and I think it's a, and this is the world that I'm trying to avoid living in, where once again, we leave religion just to fall for under the spell of other things, and it looks like it's inevitable. It looks like we're always going to be in groups, and there are certain. Is it possible that we're always going to be united? Maybe being too united is not a great thing after all. Maybe we need to be a little bit different. I'm not quite sure. Uh, do you think being a carbon copy of each other is going to help our evolution or improve us as a human race, or should we celebrate our differences every now and then?
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's one thing that chills my blood about this cultural appropriation thing. What's that? Your fraternity is planning a Mexican food night, and you're not all Mexicans. You can't do that. Are you insane? They're celebrating your culture. They're glad it's here and want to participate. What, you got the copyright on this? It just seems crazy to me. It's like a self-imposed apartheid of some kind, and so we're getting vociferous to the point of setting up different colonies. I don't understand that. Surely mutual respect, intermarriage, things like that can only improve the human community.
Right. A question for you here, Dr. Bobby. Do you think there are certain select few individuals, the Freemason theory and all these sort of select groups of people who are trying to control the world?
Well, not totalistically, but I think now there is something mighty close to that, again, because of these annual Davos conferences, that they themselves use the phrase the New World Order and the Great Reset to change the world's economy, and to have it headquartered and ultimately to have one world government. I used to think this stuff was like Dale Gribble on King of the Hill, but it's just in the news, and they release publications that are saying this and how they're going to try to change the monetary system. It's not in the closet anymore. It's not in the shadows. So I love the biblical myth of the principalities and powers, the superhuman collective forces of evil that were not that are not under the control of humans, but govern the world through the selfish interests of kings and princes and popes and stuff like that. You don't really need the myth to recognize that, but it's a striking articulation of it. And who can deny that? Just look at the leaders, who they are and what they say. It's very frightening.
Have you ever voted Democrat in your life? Was there
Yeah, I voted for
ever?
Jimmy Carter. Oh, what a mistake that was. Um, yeah, I guess my first vote was in the 68 election. I think it was, yeah, I saw Nixon at a campaign rally. Yeah, I voted for him stupidly. I mean, I really knew nothing about him, but I just kind of enjoyed his appearance at their convention. I was an idiot kid. I couldn't really approve or disapprove of him. But then I voted for Carter and and Reagan. Then I didn't vote the next time because the idiot screwed up my registration form, but I would have voted for Ross Perot. I believe I
Right.
voted for Ralph Nader once. I was at least thinking about it. I think I did it. I voted for Bob Dole, and then after that, Republicans all the way.
All right. So your history, so you can change your mind on certain situation. When it comes to this particular question, where it says, "Can you ask Dr. Price, should we conservatives admit we were wrong when we didn't support left-wingers like Greenwald, Assange, Chelsea Manning 10, 20 years ago on government overreach, NSA, FBI, and CIA?"
I kind of think so. I think I'd agree with that because they're much sneakier than we thought at the time.
Yeah. So you do like the stance of having a competing party. Yeah, you want somebody to keep the Republican on their toes, and you like competition, because if this is the sole party that are always going to be governing, then they might be complacent and they might be too comfortable. Like, so you
Mhm.
do like the competition. You want to see
Yeah.
the competition because that will only get you to improve your stance on things.
Yes. Right.
Um, Black nobility from Phoenicia and the Freemasons. What do you think of that?
I know there's a lot of artificial mythology connected with the Masons, so I automatically I would really have to be shown evidence. But a lot of the stuff they say is just made up, it seems to me. But the specific thing you're asking here, I'm utterly unfamiliar with that. I've never heard of it. Which I'm saying it shows my ignorance, not that you don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
fair enough. Yeah, I'm poorly read on the subject myself. Look, I mean, I'm going to leave with maybe declaring my stance on this situation here. I am going to be friends with Dr. Bob. I'm going to be friends with the platforms that don't think it's suitable to host Dr. Bob at this point, because I think this is the only reasonable stance for me to have. I want to entertain all ideas, sometimes including dangerous ones, because how else would you stop dangerous ideas from fostering or getting into the realm of actions unless you're engaging with them? If you believe certain ideas are dangerous and you're thinking just by putting them aside and brushing them under the carpets, everything will be all right, then I think it's crazy. I think we need to talk to each other and we need to challenge and push each other in all sort of directions.
Hmm.
I don't see any other way. I think outcasting is a dangerous endeavor.
Hmm.
We've seen some people. I had a friend of mine, David Silverman, is a great example of a person who's gone the other way around. I think he's now a sort of a right wingish after being with the left for a number of years, because he's been um, given as a scapegoat. He's made some mistakes. He admitted them. Then he was completely been given to the altar of the political correctness, and say, well, you know what? We're all virtual. We're all virtuous. We're all moral people, and we can never do anything wrong. And people like that should never. We should never suffer them to live. So I've started to understand the danger of that, and I want to have a stance where I want to keep engaging all parties. I'm not going to be I'm not sure how I'm going to be perceived now, because there are people who are going to say, hey, you know what, no, you're either with us or against us, sort of thing. And I don't like that approach, and I'm not going to be bullied into that approach. I'm going to wanting to converse with people like yourself or those who oppose you, because I want to understand what motivates these ideas. What do you think, Dr. Price? And if you have
Oh,
any
yeah.
final.
No one listening to this should cheat themselves by ceasing to watch Myth Vision, because there are these problems that really are not indicative of the strength of that show. That is an unparalleled way of putting these advanced scholars in touch with a fandom they didn't know they had, of people hungry to know about the Bible and the history of religion from a critical standpoint. This is just what Bob Funk and Dominic Crossan created the Jesus Seminar for. And it did have some reach. But I think it must pale in comparison to what Myth Vision and other podcasts like this and History Valley and Gnostic Informant do. It's a rare opportunity. I have no criticism of what Derek is doing in that, and I still endorse the show.
I think one last, I mean, people are still sending me messages. I think that will be the last question for you here because they saw apparently some comments I got from the private messaging, the slight double standards, the Capitol building, that was not perceived to be rioting, but then you've mentioned that you reckon that this was a false flag. This was a planted incident to
Mhm.
make certain people look bad.
Mhm.
But,
Yeah,
but
that
that,
is what I think. Yeah.
but don't you think that this particular rationale can be used exactly to advocate the other side? So maybe a black rioters could say, well, there are some insiders who would actually, sorry, outsiders who would actually enter our peaceful rallies to cause mayhem and therefore tarnish our reputation.
It could be. That's why I admit you can't really automatically believe what anybody says involved in the political game. You ultimately have to be agnostic, but if there is evidence you can follow, you might be in the position of having to make a decision about it. Usually, probably not. I mean, it's even bad news on the news is a kind of weird entertainment that really stops in the room in which you're watching it. So it's I don't know. Anybody could be lying about this stuff. Everybody could be lying about it. I don't have any particular favorite liars.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I think the conversation needs to continue. I mean, I'm going to be. I wanted before all of that to get in touch with you to talk about certain biblical texts, and I think we're going to continue to do so. I think maybe this area. Do you think going forward? What is your stance? What is your gut feel? Are you gonna sort of minimize conversation about this area and stick to the areas where you enjoy the most and where people you're still going to have some slack from the religious people telling you don't understand the Bible too well and the Holy Spirit hasn't entered you, and I don't think, I think in this existence you might as well do exactly what you believe in and what you want, because no matter what you do, you'll always have people who are going to be going against you.
Though, it's very surprising to me all these years of doing the Bible Geek and even doing debates with arena full of fundamentalists. I have been pleasantly amazed that I do not get militant opposition. Everybody that lines up at the mic or that sends in questions, they all, wherever they stand, some say, oh, I'm a Christian, I'm an agnostic, I'm an atheist, whatever, they all are just asking good, sincere questions. It's an amazing surprise. I just assumed, I think I can think of one guy that got ugly about it once in my very first debate, but I only remember that because it's like the only time it happened. So actually, that's an optimistic sign. But I am going to continue to just answer questions for kindred spirits who want to pursue these topics, and just not going to be doing it on Myth Vision, but doing the same thing elsewhere. I don't care. And
Yeah. So, do you think then the political stance will sort of be sort of not brought up unless somebody is really pushing you in that direction?
I think so, because I don't know why it happened this time. I wonder who had the bee in their bonnet and why, because I don't talk about these things on the Bible Geek or anybody else's podcast. But people hear that this freak is a Republican or a conservative, and they feel like they got to do something about that. Or maybe they just need to see the freak. I don't know, but I don't know why they care what I think. I mean, do they care what my favorite color is? It's equally relevant to them. my views have no effect on anybody. It's just armchair pontificating.
Yeah, I think the one that they are catching on at the moment is the one that is affecting reality, like shooting down of the rioters and things like that. But now, once you've explained it, and this is very important again, once you've explained it in the context of a combat where the
Mhm.
rioters are, carrying guns and they're threatening other lives, the response shouldn't be here. Here's a rose for you. No, it should be, sorry, I'm going to defend my own life, and rightly so. I'm in agreement in that context, and all of us will do it without flinching. If somebody's entering our homes to threaten our families or trying to kill us, and as I said, I'll end up. I won't be Socrates or Plato. I'll be Mike Tyson on that, in that kind of context, and
Mhm.
rightly so. Yeah. So. Very interesting conversation. You got
Yeah.
you're going to be always welcome here, on Critical Faculty, and I do intend to have a conversation with you, going back to the juicy stuff of Christianity and
Mm.
our history. I think we've got a long way to go. We're human species. Our prefrontal lobe cortex is only 2 million years old, so we're quite emotional still.
Mhm.
We're not that rational. The Russian and Ukraine invasion shows us that we've got a long way to go. What's your stance, by the way, on that?
Is the conceivable point of this from anybody's viewpoint? What is Putin trying to do except to make himself live in infamy forever? Is he going to depopulate it? Bomb it to hell? What does that get him? It's baffling. And why are we trying to prolong the war, to have a kind of half hot, half cold war with a nuclear power, willing to use the stuff? What is anybody thinking?
Strange, very
It's
strange.
utterly beyond me.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's almost like a Saddam Hussein syndrome. When you're in power for so long, you go cuckoo towards the end, and you think you're invincible, and that was the downfall of Saddam, and the Kuwait invasion. So I think that's probably the start of the end for him. And I
Oh,
could be
yes,
wrong, but
yes.
um, well, thank you so much. It was very, very pleasant having you on, and
Yeah, I loved it.
I'm hoping that the other sides were listening in today and
Mm.
saw the situation in a slightly different light today. I'm hoping that my friends from all the different platforms, I'm very careful because I don't want to drag my friends who are suffering from the gang mentality of being pushed around themselves to take a
Mm.
certain stance. And I know deep down the friendship and the love they have for you, even though they disagree with you on certain things. I disagree with you on certain things, and I still love you. And I, yeah, and that's a sort of a given. And maybe this is a better world that we can look forward to. We can
Mm.
uh, be able to deal with our differences and not. I think just the outcasting, the new current outcasting situation is a bit weak and a bit coward, to be honest.
Mm.
I'd want to face it. If I disagree with somebody, I want to square up to them and say, "Hey, you're wrong because of one, two, and three. Convince me." I don't know. Call me old-fashioned.
Well, there's this, classic Catholic devotional book was The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A. Kempis. And I read this back in 1976. And one thing, I don't remember the exact wording, but this stuck with me forever. In it, Jesus tells Thomas A. Kempis, this monk, basically, hey, who told you to set everybody straight? And it was something to that effect. And I always thought, yeah, what gives me the right, or who assigned me the job of saying, well, you're probably wrong about that, but lucky for you, here I am, and I know. What kind of pompous ass? And I've always tried to take that to heart, which is hard to do, being such a big mouth as I am. But
Yeah.
you can try.
Thank you so much for your time today. And next conversation, I promise, is going to be something interesting outside of your beliefs or convictions about political. I know it's always dividing, especially in the United States. This has been a difficult 10 years. It's been very dividing, and I think it's caused a lot of agony for the United States. We're once seen as a power that is a guardian of a galaxy, one of the, and hopefully it will come back to its role to do just that, and not being divided from within. We would like to see those custodians are in a strong position where they can help humanity prosper, and not having issues from within, because it will affect the rest of the world. And I'd like to thank you very much one more time, and looking forward to talking to you again.
You bet. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.